After the Islamic terrorist attack in San Bernardino, which killed 14 people, Attorney General Loretta Lynch proclaimed that her biggest fear was not more ISIS-inspired attacks, but the rise of anti-Muslim rhetoric. She threatened to prosecute, quote, anti-Muslim speech edging toward violence, despite the fact that this would be a flagrant violation of the United States Constitution. Several key officials in the Obama administration echoed the sentiment, including President Obama, who years ago asserted at the UN that the future does not belong to those who slander the Prophet of Islam. Merely weeks after the San Bernardino terrorist attack, Democrats in Congress submitted a bill to the Judiciary Committee, House Resolution 8569, condemning anti-Muslim hate speech. The bill, thankfully, has no prayer of making inroads, but it's pathetic that 126 out of 188 Democrats co-sponsored this legislation in utter contempt for our First Amendment freedoms. Pending in Canada is Quebec Bill 59, which, if passed, will allow human rights commissions to issue fines for speech critical about Islam, even on a Facebook page. And just recently, Canada's National Assembly unanimously passed a motion to condemn Islamophobia and hateful rhetoric toward Quebecans of Muslim faith. Additionally, just weeks after the 800th anniversary of the Magna Carta, the British Parliament held a 3-hour debate on whether or not to ban presidential candidate Donald Trump for so-called hate speech regarding his policy position that Muslims should not be allowed to migrate into the U.S. until government officials can properly vet them. Increasingly, the UK is using a ban from entry as a form of censorship for those who speak critically about Islam, while turning a blind eye to Muslims who preach death to all things British from mosques in the UK. As ISIS rises, and with the influx of Muslim migrants to the West, Islamists and their enablers are working painstakingly to censor speech on all relevant issues. The increase in speech-stifling laws and policies are not a coincidence. They are the result of years of work by the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, Muslim Brotherhood front groups, and their enablers. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the largest Islamic organization in the world and the most powerful voting bloc in the UN, consists of 56 UN member states plus the Palestinian Authority. It's an Islamic supremacist group which has long advocated for the international criminalization of speech that sheds Islam in a negative light. In effect, it seeks the Western equivalent of Islamic blasphemy laws, in furtherance of its ultimate goal to reestablish an Islamic caliphate and implement worldwide Sharia law. In 2005, the OIC launched a 10-year program of action, a main component of which was to, quote, combat defamation of Islam by passing an internationally adopted UN resolution and persuading Western countries to outlaw so-called Islamophobia. Now, after the 10th year of the 10-year plan, it's clear that the OIC is achieving its goals. Resolution 1618 to combat intolerance based on religion or belief and its subsequent implementation process, known as the Istanbul Process, facilitates annual international conferences where heads of state from all over the world share their best practices, largely aimed at protecting Islam from defamation. Additionally, with increasing frequency in countries throughout Europe and the West, people are being prosecuted, either civilly or criminally, for speech that defames Islam. This includes truthful comments about Islamic terrorism, Islamic persecution of religious minorities, and human rights violations committed in the name of Islam. In America, chastisements by government officials, far from being mere hollow threats or idle chatter, create an environment which makes it easier to pass hate speech laws down the road and has a potentially chilling effect. It cannot be a coincidence that on college campuses, instead of learning the Constitution, its founding principles, and the superiority of the Judeo-Christian values upon which freedom flourishes, students are indoctrinated with the multicultural delusion that all cultures, values, and religions are equal. It is imperative that we acknowledge that our values of freedom, equality, and human rights are superior to the Islamist values of tyranny, discrimination, and oppression. Yet, our national security apparatus, against a backdrop of political correctness and appeasement to Islamists, is shifting its emphasis from protecting the security of American citizens from Islamic supremacism to protecting the Muslim community from offensive speech under the guise of civil rights. Free speech is not just a right in and of itself, but is the foundation of many other rights critical to a democracy, including political dissent, a free press, and religious freedom. Free speech is a cornerstone freedom, without which other freedoms couldn't exist. What good is it if you have freedom of thought, but can't congregate to pray in a church? Free speech is necessary for the advancement of human rights. Human rights violations, such as the forced marriages of little girls in the Middle East, cannot be addressed in the Human Rights Council because these practices are permissible under Sharia law, and to discuss them would be to defame Islam, a sin worse than the crimes themselves. Freedom of speech is also necessary for national security efforts. The enemy threat doctrine requires that we be able to accurately identify our enemy and name it by name in order to produce an effective strategy of defeat. We are in a war of ideas. The manipulation of language is designed to conceal the goals of jihadists and their enablers who would do us harm, whether through violent jihad or stealth anti-freedom measures. I wrote a monograph titled The Organization of Islamic Cooperation's Jihad on Free Speech, which explains what the OIC is and its goals to silence the public. Please buy the book and become informed before it's too late. We must be vigilant if we want to keep America free.